And good morning, everyone, and welcome to Small Biz Matters, the half-hour program where you work on your business rather than in it. Thank you very much for joining me once again. My name is Alexi Boyd, your trusted host, bringing you through all the matters that matter to small business. But today we're doing something a little bit different. Now, I know it's getting close to the election this Saturday, and let me just put in that quick little word I've been doing every week for the last 3 weeks. Don't vote ahead of time. Don't go and do pre-voting, because we want you to go to the schools and we want you to buy a sausage sizzle and we want you to buy a cake from the cake stall to take home for your yummy post-election dinner, where we all sit down and we watch the results live on air, because it is a very exciting evening. It's going to be a very exciting evening for one person who is sitting opposite me today, and that is Julian Leeser. He is our Liberal candidate for the seat of Berowra. Thank you so much for joining us today, Julian.
Thanks for having me, Alexi. I've been looking forward to coming in and seeing you, and I agree with you entirely. Vote on election day, and the best reason to do so is that it's freezing up at pre-poll at the moment, and Saturday the weather's predicted to be a bit warmer. So
yeah, we were just talking about all the lovely volunteers from across all the parties. You have to admire them as you drive past in your very warm car, looking at them just standing there and explaining to people how to vote, because it's a bit of a different set of kettle of fish this time, isn't it? We've got a bit of a different voting method, and I think it is really great for those how to vote cards to be handed out. So not only so people know how to vote for their particular political persuasion, but also so people know how to vote, so we haven't got lots of donkey votes, which we do not want.
That's right. I mean, I think the important thing for people to know in terms of voting is on the green ballot paper, which is the ballot paper for the House of Representatives. There are 7 candidates in the Berowra electorate, and people have to number every box 1 to 7 in that ballot paper. It's
so
not
they
like
can't
the
just put a 1?
No, that's not a formal vote. And they can't even just put a 1 or a 2. You've got to fill in all 7 squares. In relation to the Senate ballot paper, that's where the real changes have happened this time. The tablecloth. And it's very big, people who voted in the Senate.
Every time.
Well, it's good in a way, in that more and more people are participating in our democracy and are standing and forming their own parties and so on, and that's fair enough for them. But it makes it difficult for voters because there's so much choice there. The important thing for people to know is that you need to number at least 6 boxes above the line if you want to vote above the line, or if you want to vote below the line, you need to number at least 12 boxes. Now, you can number more than that, but in previous times, political parties have said just vote 1 above the line, and if you voted 2, 3 above the line, that wasn't a formal vote. This time, you need to vote 6 above the line. Now, I know on some radio stations, not this one, people have been saying, oh, yeah, just keep voting 1 above the line.
What?
And as I've said
That's
to
wrong.
people, well, that's wrong. Are these radio hosts, are they the Electoral Commission? No, they're not. And what will happen at the end of the day, if there are a bunch of people who voted just 1 above the line and not done the right thing, the whole thing will end up in the High Court, and we'll have to have a rerun of the Senate election. And frankly, I don't want to stand out in the cold at pre-poll again, and people don't want to have to come and vote in the Senate again. So let's get it right. Let's do it once and let's do it properly.
That's a really good point, actually. And I think when you get there and you think, oh, someone would tell me how to do it at the time, but you're just in such a hurry to get through the process and get there and vote and then get your sausage sizzle, which is compulsory, and you haven't got time to think about what to do. So use those. Maybe this is one of those times that we do think about using those how to vote cards.
It is really important. And even if you're not that interested, it's a really polite thing to take a card from everybody. The volunteers from all parties are really nice people. They're community-minded people. They're motivated to stand out there in the cold for a whole day in many instances. Some of them have been standing out at pre-poll as well. And the information that they give you is information that will help you cast a valid vote and will help you to support whichever party that you prefer of the people that are available to vote for. And so it's a process that's designed to help you as the voter.
And be nice, people. That's a good point. Be nice. These people are volunteers, just like the rest of us. And buy a sausage sizzle.
Well, as you said a minute ago, turning up is compulsory. The sausage sizzle is also compulsory.
Yes, that's right. That's exactly right. So let's turn our minds to some of the electoral issues that are coming out. Now, it's been an interesting election in that some topics have been put to the side and not really discussed, which for some people in the community find that disappointing. But let's talk about some of the topics that have been brought to light lately. The NBN. Now, this is something that I'm a big advocate for, obviously, as a small business owner. Now, me personally, working for my own small business, I'm entirely in the cloud. So I don't have any paper at all. Everything I have is cloud-based. I don't have a server, and I need that fast NBN. So particularly people involved in media or those who are working with large files, it's not just about the download speed. So I know that the political parties in the past have sort of kick this around like a political football, talking about Netflix and talking about the gaming industry and how it's affecting them. Never mind the fact that the gaming industry is actually quite a significant growing industry in Australia.
Indeed.
But it's not about that. It's about how we as businesses can compete worldwide. I, as a bookkeeper, I don't just compete with the bookkeepers in Hornsby. I compete with them in Australia. I compete with the bookkeepers in Indonesia, Asia, Philippines, and those countries have got a faster internet connectivity than we have now, let alone in 5 years' time when we can't even begin to imagine what we need to use the internet for. And I have to say it has been disappointing that the NBN has not been a bigger issue when the Liberal Party are talking about how they support small business. For me, this is a no-brainer. This should be number one issue for small business to bring us into the rest of the world to make us competitive. So what's the future hold in the next 12 months for the NBN?
Well, let me say a few things about the NBN. Let me say something about it locally, because I've got lots of questions about it locally, and then let me talk about the NBN more broadly. Now, the NBN construction work has been starting in the local area in relation to the NBN at Glenhaven, Berowra, Brooklyn, Cowan, Dangar Island and Dural will all be started in the second half of this year. In fact, Glenhaven, it's already started. And by the end of 2018, 42,000 homes and businesses across the Berowra electorate will have the NBN ready for service or under construction. And that's good. That's ahead of schedule, as it would have been. And one of the great things about the Coalition's NBN plan is that we've delivered the NBN both under budget and ahead of schedule. Labor basically spent 6 years and got 51,000 premises connected. We get 60,000 premises connected a month, which is people able to access the NBN a month, which is pretty good. That's why we can say with confidence that by the end of 2018 it will come here. Now, the opposition's policy, they can't tell us when we'd get the NBN in Berowra. With us, there's a clear timetable. Now, in relation to the speeds, 83% of people who've connected up to the NBN across the country have connected to the 25 megabit per second speed. And that's the lowest speed on the internet. And people can connect to those higher speeds, but I think that that's an interesting statistic that the vast majority of people have connected to the lowest speed possible. Different businesses will require different speed connections, and those options will be available into the future.
You mentioned the 25 megabits per second. Did you know that Japan's about to turn on a 1 gigabyte per second internet and across the board as well? I mean, I know that they don't have the same geological problems that we have. They don't have environmental problems, and obviously they're not as big as we are. It's very, very small. But how can we possibly compete? We have to compete with them on a business level. We have to compete with the US. You only have to talk to people who run businesses who go to the US for whatever reason. You go to a hotel in the middle of Oklahoma and it's got 3 times faster speed than we have in the middle of Sydney, and it's free. How can we possibly know that what we're putting in the ground now or putting into the copper wiring, whatever it is that we're doing, how do we know that it's going to be able to compete in 5 years' time?
Well, look, this is one of the reasons that we've rolled out the NBN in the way that we have. I mean, with the Labor Party, it was all about, fibre to the premises and so on. It was everyone will be fibre, and of course we know there's a range of different technologies that can be used with relation to the NBN.
But isn't the reason why we haven't gone with fibre because it was too expensive?
Yes, it was, and we were doing things like not accessing the cable TV cables which were already there. Instead, we went to Optus, we went to Telstra, and we said, look, what's the point of duplicating a service that's already there? We'd like to use your services and so on. And that's one of the reasons that we're able to deliver it cheaper and faster. I haven't had anybody come to me in the community and say they want a 1 gigabit per second, internet.
Well, not now, but in 5 years' time, we will be needing that in order to compete with the rest of the world, because they will be even further ahead than that.
Well, all I can say is that we need to go back to the statistics of what people are actually doing now, and they're not even getting at the 100 bit per second, they're at the 25 bit per second, and I think that's the megabit per second. I think that indicates that we're a long way off people needing to get to the 1 gigabyte per second speed at the moment.
So as you mentioned out with the rollout, it looks as though it's happening from the outside of the Berowra electorate in, so we're moving towards the centre of Hornsby. Has a priority always been for the regional areas to get the NBN because they can't access typical day-to-day internet?
Look, that's a matter for the NBN Corporation. They will work out where the rollout is best first. I know particularly in the rural areas of the electorate, connectivity is an issue. I know that mobile phone coverage is an issue. There are all sorts of communication issues are an issue. It's one of the reasons that one of the things I've been, particularly pursuing is the mobile black spot issue, because I found that door knocking that's actually been a real issue in the rural areas. And some of the people will be able to get the internet through the new mobile phone substations that are being delivered there. But as to the rollout order, that's really a matter for NBN Co. It's not a political decision as such that's been made.
Okay. And in terms of the future, is what the Liberal Party are putting in now going to give us the capacity to grow in 3, 5, 10 years' time? Or are we looking at a situation when we're going to have to rip it up and put it back again?
No. What we are putting in place now will give us capacity well into the future, I believe.
Okay, that's your understanding. Okay, wonderful. Let's talk about climate change now. My regular listeners will know I'm a little bit of an environmental Nazi. I'm happy to put that hat on. I feel as though this is a topic that has completely fallen off the radar when it comes to the media in general, and also what the Liberal Party want to talk about. Is that because it's not a strength of the Liberal Party, or is it because we don't know what the policy is and it's not concrete?
Well, Alexi, I think we've done a bad job of selling it. I think we've got a great story to sell here. In terms of emission reduction, we're well and truly on track to meet our 2020 reduction targets, and we should meet and beat our 2030 reduction targets, which were a stretch target, 26 to 28% emission reduction on 2005 levels by 2030. I think we should be proud that we're doing that. I think we should be proud of the fact that the Emissions Reduction Fund has been an enormous success. People predicted it wouldn't do anything, but we've actually bought 147 billion tonnes of carbon abatement, which is fantastic. The government's announced a $1 billion reef fund in this election. When we came to government 3 years ago, the barrier reef was on the endangered list. Today, Australia is winning awards for reef management. We've been taken off the endangered list. Now, yes, there's coral bleaching that's still occurring there. And in this election, and in terms of the reef fund that's been established there, we are trying to get farmers who are in the reef catchment area to use more renewable technologies in relation to their machinery, in relation to their production. We're also looking to ensure that soil runoff and pesticide runoff doesn't go into the reef. We've stopped 5 of the dredging things that were going on the reef at the time that we came to government. We've got a really good story to tell there. And then, of course, there's the solar program having the 23.5% renewable energy target for Australia, which is an achievable target and it's a sensible target.
Isn't that only being taken up by private institutions, though? There's no rebates. All the rebates for the solar panels are being scaled back for December.
The solar panel rebates for individual homes, that's a state issue. It's not a federal issue. In terms of what we've done at the federal issue, there's the Solar Towns program where we've encouraged 100 solar projects in community organisations across Australia, delivering over 1,500 kilowatts of new solar generation capacity. And in terms of the Solar Communities program, we've provided funding of up to $15,000 for community organisations to use more solar power. I mean, I think we've got a good story to tell, and perhaps we're just not out there advocating enough for it. I do get asked a lot of questions at train stations about climate change when I'm going door knocking, and I'm always happy to tell the positive story that we've got to tell in that regard. And I think we should be proud of what we're doing in that area as Australians.
In terms of this is something you and I have raised in a personal discussion. There's a lot of people have got great concerns about the Adani project, which is happening up in Queensland, the new coal port which is being built. Now, Adani has got a history it's an Indian company, has got a history of dredging, of destroying environments across other parts of Micronesia, and they've got a bad history in terms including criminal activity and being found to be bribing local governments. Why are we engaging with that sort of a company to build a coal port in Queensland off the Great Barrier Reef, which is already in such a sensitive state as it is? Well,
we've got proper regulation of the activities of companies that are doing things in and around the Great Barrier Reef, and we've got to make sure that regulation is properly applied. we have to have a balance in our country between the importance of preserving the environment. And as I say, we've got a great story to tell about the reef, and the reef has been a great priority of the Turnbull government, as it was a priority for the Abbott government before it. But we've also got to have acknowledge that coal is one of our big export industries, and that we've got to get coal to market, and that's very important.
We're going to go to a quick break, and then we're going to come back and talk a little bit more about various issues that are important to the people of Berowra. You're here on Triple H 100.1 FM listening to Small Biz Matters, and I have my guest here, Julian Leeser. We will be back after these community service announcements. And welcome back to Small Biz Matters, the half-hour program where you work on your business rather than in it. We are here today talking all things politics with Julian Leeser, who is the federal candidate for the seat of Berowra. Thank you once again also for joining us here in the studio. But of course, thanks again for that candidate debate, which for those of you who attended was an excellent evening put on by the Hornsby Chamber of Commerce. We had all 7 members in the room, all 7 candidates in the room, I should say, and an interesting discussion was had. We covered lots of really great topics, which was excellent, not just the topics which people would assume that politicians would like to talk about, which was interesting. Now, just before we go back to our discussion, let's have a quick check of the weather and the roads.
I hope nobody's been killed this morning on our roads, and I hope that there's nobody been injured in any of those things. But the first traffic story you had really is you've highlighted the absolute number one key problem in our whole community, which is Pennant Hills Road, and it's another morning in the paradise, which is Berowra.
You live right in the middle of it,
well,
don't you, Julian?
I do. I live not far from Pennant Hills Road. We travel it every single morning and every single evening, and the NRMA told us it was the worst road in Australia. They didn't really need to tell us that. We already know it living in this community. And that's why North Connects is so important. North Connects, which will be finished in 2019, it's important that it's delivered on time and on budget because it'll make a huge difference to the lives of people who are living here.
And also to the businesses, which is important. Is there a plan? I mean, we used to have precinct plans when we had a sort of local government precinct plans. They don't exist in Hornsby and Shire, unfortunately, anymore. But I think they're really important for places like Pennant Hills, Normanhurst, Thornley, those areas that are going to be hopefully revitalised with the North Connects. Is there a plan for what's going on for small business?
This is a council matter, but I understand that the council is doing various town centre plans. I mean, there's town centre plans currently being developed for a place like Brooklyn.
Yes.
And I know that the town centre plan is going to be developed for Pennant Hills. So it's ready and coincides with the completion of North Connects, because it will change places like Pennant Hills and Thornley and Thompson's Corner as well as a result of this. I mean, it's getting thousands of trucks and cars off our roads every day. For those trucks and cars using it, they'll avoid 22 sets of traffic lights. It'll make Pennant Hills Road more of a local road again, and it'll mean people who are, getting off the arteries which feed into Pennant Hills Road, roads like Newline Road, Castle Hill Road, Beecroft Road, where there's the accident this morning, will have quicker commutes, and it'll be a more pleasant experience because you won't have the B doubles all the time. And it will mean also at night time, as we so often hear down the valley, the brakes being applied on those big B doubles, and it's just an unpleasant experience to drive. And often, I think it's particularly bad on a Friday afternoon. Sometimes I'll go and buy some fish for dinner at Seafood at Hornsby, and then try to get from Seafood at Hornsby at Westfield back to my home in Pennant Hills, and it can take up to an hour on a Friday afternoon.
Oh, that's dreadful.
Ridiculous. And as everybody
there you are
knows,
trying to support a small business.
Indeed, and as everybody knows, over the weekend, particularly on a Saturday when you've got people rushing around taking their kids to school sport, not only is Pennant Hills Road bad, but people think, we've got to avoid Pennant Hills Road, so we'll use all the rat runs.
Yes.
So places like Sefton Road get completely chockers, and Yarara Road and so on, because everybody knows how bad it is. So we need to get that through traffic back onto Pennant Hills Road. We need to give people confidence that they can drive.
Now, agreed, that's happening. But what I'd love to see is if you're talking about these, sorry, what did you call them? Not precinct plans, but local
town centre
plans. I'd like to see that there was more consultation happening with small business in the area. Your Hornsby fish and chip shops that have been there for decades. Those institutionalised shops that really know the area and know the clientele, are they going to be consulted in those?
Oh, look, obviously this is a matter for the council. But
the council is a Liberal council.
It is, but we have a separation between state, federal and local government. That's not me passing the buck at all, and I know the shopkeepers very well in Pennant Hills. I live in Pennant Hills, and I know what an active group of people that they are, and how concerned they are about making the streets better, making the shopping experience better there, dealing with issues like parking, dealing with issues like streetscape and footpaths and so on. So, yes, they will be consulted very heavily, and if they want to come to me, and I'll help them, not just as the federal member but as a local resident to make representations there. I think one of the things that is really great about our local area, and I'll just talk about Pennant Hills particularly for a second here, is the way in which there are all these new businesses that are having a go. I mean, we have, I think, 7 coffee shops now in Pennant Hills. There are almost as many coffee shops in Pennant Hills as there are hairdressers in Beecroft. I think there's more hairdressers in Beecroft than, anywhere in the whole planet. But people are having a go, and I think that that's fantastic. And we've got some just tremendous businesses there. I mean, Tony and Joanne Falgen, the dry cleaners there, who I think provide extraordinary service to their customers. I remember we were house sitting once during the summer, and we had some friends to dinner, and someone spilt red wine on a white couch, and I rang up and said, what do we do? I said, don't we bring the couch over? And they came and they fixed it. It's that extra level of care and concern that we see in so many of our businesses here, which make people proud to shop in the local area, and that's good. And so, I think it's the government's role to try and create an environment for business to flourish. Now, at the federal level, we've got more responsibility in relation to taxation sort of matters, whereas at the council level, they've got responsibility for general amenity issues and the sort of built environment that you'll have around the shops.
Well, it's wonderful that you're opening yourself up to have that negotiation, and not negotiation, but the discussion. And I agree, this area is a place where people are willing to stand up and say, well, hang on a sec, that's not really working for me. I'd like to hear my voice heard. And the consultation process is what people are really crying out for.
Absolutely.
It's actually something we were talking about just before we came on air with the issue that in the light of Hornsby Council, and again, I know this is a local issue and not something that you can necessarily touch on, but we would like to see in the small business community, and I speak for everyone on the Chamber of Commerce, more consultation, more discussion, more openness with local business at a committee level, or sort of a community level, with decisions that are affecting those local businesses.
Well, look, I see that, and let me just give you an example of this. I door-knocked the Beecroft shops a few weeks ago, and they've had real issues there in relation to some of the development that's going on.
Yes,
in
and
relation
it's
to parking.
and heritage and all that sort of thing, yes.
Heritage less so for the shops, but certainly for the people that live there. And you've almost got a perfect storm because you've lost the supermarket there and so on. And some of the shopkeepers feel that they've been forgotten a little. So I took the liberty of going and writing to the mayor, and I gave him a list of things that I'd heard that day and asked him to have a look at it. He came back to me with a letter, and I'm going back to him with another letter saying, well, look, there's a few more things that I think that we could do to better consult with the shopkeepers, and I hope after the election I'll be able to go back with him and we'll go and visit the shopkeepers together and talk about, how we can make things during the course of the large developments that are going on there in that shopping precinct, a less distressing experience than it is being for some of the shopkeepers. Because
as businesses, we know that development and progress and things like the North Connects are absolutely crucial to making Sydney a functioning place. But you've got to make sure that those people aren't forgotten. So you heard it here first, guys. If you are a business in those local areas and you have wonderful representatives in the state level, the federal level and the local level, use those representatives. They are there to represent your concerns.
We want to work together. I mean, there is no point having the Liberal Party representing you at 3 levels of government if the community is not seeing us work together. And that's, for me, that's very important. I know it's important for all my state colleagues, and it's important for the council as well. We want to deliver outcomes for the community, and I think so the work that's been done on the Hornsby Quarry that was started by Matt Keane and Steve Russell with some assistance from Philip Ruddock is an example of the sort of thing that we can achieve when all 3 levels get together. As North Connects, obviously the council wasn't involved there, but North Connects is another example of that. And the fact that we didn't have North Connects or any work on Pennant Hills Road for so long was, I think, indicative of the fact of what happens where you don't have the Liberal Party at both levels of government in this area. We do get forgotten.
Interesting. Let's talk about TAFE, because here on Small Biz Matters, we've been talking about this TAFE issue for a number of months. We've hounded Matt Keane about it. We've hounded anyone we could get hold of, really. But basically, I have to say that after the hit on the TAFE system with the federal funding. So for those of you who don't know, there was millions of dollars put into private institutions who took the place of TAFE, and there were a few shonky dealers out there who approached people who were clearly not going to be achieving university level or even tertiary level education at all, given free laptops. We've all heard those stories, and their success rate and the pass rate for those courses were in the, under 10% in some cases. And those companies have just basically hit the bankrupt button, and the CEOs of those companies have walked away with millions and millions of dollars of federal money. Isn't that a bit of a disaster in terms of funding?
Absolutely outrageous, can I say? I mean, this process was under a national partnership agreement that started under the Rudd and Gillard government, which had the laudable goal, of subjecting the vet sector to competition in the way that the university sector is subjected to competition. Can I say I've worked in the university sector for the last 4 years. I'm very familiar with some of the settings in higher education, and one of the things that I did at the university sector was we ran a course for TAFE directors and senior management to talk about, well, how do you deal with competition now in the vet sector? One of the key issues that happened in the Rudd-Gillard years was that there wasn't adequate regulation of the private providers that were entering the vet sector, and exactly the sort of processes that you've described occurred, where there were shonky operators. In the university sector, just to give you a comparator, each time you do a course, there's a thing called the HEC census date. That's the date by which you're basically locked into the course. You have to pay your fees. University, you pay per course, per completion, or per HEC census date. In these vet courses, people were paying for the whole course up front on enrolment. There were recruiters who were being paid exorbitant fees to just bring students in the door, many people who were absolutely not qualified to undertake these vet sector courses were being pumped in, and as you say, these CEOs ran away with enormous amounts of money. And that's why Minister Birmingham, when he was the Minister for Vocational Education, he's now the Minister for Higher Education, he cracked down on these dodgy providers and so on, and that's not happening again. And it hasn't been happening now for the last almost 12 months since he cracked down on those things. Now, TAFE's responsibility of the state government. The federal government gives $7 billion overall for the funding of the vet sector, and that includes student loans, and it gives $1.8 billion to the states to determine how they wish to spend that money on TAFE. And I know some of the TAFEs in our area, not just in Hornsby but across the state, feel that they've not been doing as well as they could be.
Well, they've had massive funding cuts.
They have, but the reason they've had funding cuts is because they haven't been able to compete with the alternative providers. Now, we saw this in the higher education sector. What you need to do to succeed in a competitive environment, and it's no different to running a small business, is you need to think about what's your niche in the market? Who are the people that are going to employ the graduates that we're producing? How is the thing that we're producing better quality and servicing the market in a way that other providers aren't? And in the university sector, where there is a market for graduates, where the graduates being produced are the sort of graduates that the employers want, universities have succeeded. Where they are not producing graduates for employment markets, those universities are not succeeding, and the same is true of TAFE. We're in a period of transition at the moment, I believe, and I think TAFEs are looking around to try and find their particular niche and to try and find what their value proposition is and who their market is. Where they're producing people for employment markets, they will succeed.
Let me give you a very specific example. I did my bookkeeping course 3 years ago. It was $500. It is the market leader in terms of bookkeeping courses. You go to the Institute of Certified Bookkeepers, you go to the Bookkeepers Network of Australia, and they tell you to do the TAFE course because it is the best. That was $500. 3 years later, that exact same course is $2,500. So had I needed to make that decision a couple of years later, I probably wouldn't have changed, created my own small business. We would have lost that small business. We would have lost a lot of aspects of that in the local community. How on earth can a 5-fold increase for something that is already considered a market leader be positive for anyone. That's the problem, is that these market-leading courses, which small businesses have already advocated and said that they are the best at doing. I'll give you another example. I was listening to 702 a couple of weeks ago. A horticulturalist was ringing in saying, I have students now who cannot recognise plant names, because they were told at their TAFE course, because they're trying to be more competitive, have a survey, tell us what you want to learn. And the kids said, I don't want to learn about plant names. So they don't teach that to them anymore. The horticulturists say it's a massive problem because they're getting kids are not as educated as they once were. And how on earth can you educate better when you're losing thousands of staff? You're losing the support staff. Don't forget about the support staff for those people with a disability. The disability sector is losing huge amounts of students to TAFE. They can't go to the private sector because a 5-fold increase in courses for those sort of people is just not viable. If you make it more competitive, you simply make it more expensive. We've already got world-class courses. They're not going to improve the courses because they're already fantastic. You're just going to make them more expensive.
Well, there's a lot in that question there, Alexi. Let me start with the horticultural example that you gave. It's crazy, I think, for education providers to interview their students about what course content they want. It's the employers that should be being interviewed. I mean, there's no point producing... If you ask students, do you want to learn more or learn less? Do you want to have an easier time? They'll always opt for the easier time.
But you were saying that the students need to choose, and you need to make it more competitive, and now students need to choose where they want to go.
The students will choose on the basis of where they're going to get employment outcomes, and they're going to get employment outcomes where a course provider is providing a course that the employers actually want because it's rigorous, because it makes people work ready. If people are not work ready, no wonder, the horticultural employers were essentially rejecting the students that have been produced by that particular TAFE course. In relation to your bookkeeping example, well, if it's the market-leading course, they might decide to charge a premium for it. That's a reasonable sort of thing that you could do. But of course, we've got vet fee help, which is a fair system where people can pay back their things very much like they can at HECS under the university system, which is a fair enough system. I think it's a very good system. It's a world-leading system, and I think what you're saying there, if you've got a market-leading course, obviously it'll be popular. Obviously people can charge a premium. There's a reason why a Mercedes is worth more than a Mazda. In relation to the disability sector, look, TAFE has community service obligations. Again, these are all state issues. TAFE has community service obligations, and part of their community service obligations is to provide courses in areas where there is market failure and so on. I mean, I can't speak to the particular nature of the disability services courses, but I can say that I know this much about the TAFE sector, that they've got obligations in certain areas, and disability may well be one of those areas. Right,
but that is quite difficult for them to maintain such a support services when they're having funding cuts at such a massive level.
Well, that's why there is money set aside to meet community service obligations. But as I say, it's a state issue, not a federal issue.
Is there any plans in future budgets to increase vet fee help?
Look, I can't talk about future budgets. I'm not the treasurer. I'm just the Liberal candidate for Berowra. I think it's important that we have people going into the vet sector. I think it's very important. I think when you think about it, many of the most secure jobs in the future will be jobs that people have undertaken through TAFE. I mean, I'm a lawyer by background. I practice law. As with your bookkeeping business, people can send a lot of those businesses offshore to areas where the labour is cheaper. But we're always going to need our tradies. We're always going to need our plumbers and our carpenters. We're always going to need our hairdressers and so on. And many of those courses will be done and continue to be done through our vet sector courses and so on. So I think if people are looking for job security, one of the best things that you can do is to undertake a vet course. And people can be hugely successful business people having undertaken vet courses and gone into the vet sector. I think it's a much underrated sector.
We're going to take a quick break here on Small Biz Matters, and we'll be back in just a couple of minutes talking a little bit more to Julian Leeser, and you're joining us here on Triple H 100.1 FM. And you are back in the room with Small Biz Matters on Triple H 100.1 FM. Just like to say a big thank you to Julian Leeser for taking the time when we are so close to that election date this Saturday. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Alexi. And can I say to your listeners, if you see me on a polling booth between now and election day, come over and say you heard me on Small Business Matters. We'll see how many people are out there listening today.
Yes, indeed. We can do it. We can do a quick poll at the polls.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's great. And good luck this Saturday. Oh, no, wait, I'm not allowed to say that. Hang on. Chookers. I've said that to everybody. Chookers is the ballet terminology used when someone's just about to go onto the stage. So
I'm so pleased you used the ballet analogy. So often people say to me, I can't understand why people aren't interested in politics. And I always use a ballet analogy there. I say, look, I can't tell you a single thing about ballet. I don't know anything about it. In the same way I don't follow ballet, there are lots of people that don't follow politics. But the difference, of course, between ballet and politics is that you can get through some of your life not knowing anything about ballet, but we all have to vote every few years. So I hope people will come out and make an informed choice in who they're voting for at this election.
That's exactly right. And whatever it is that you do this Saturday, make sure that you are informed and you understand what it is that you're doing, and do give a thank you to those volunteers out there who are doing the how to vote cards for all of the parties. And of course, the compulsory sausage sizzle must be done and the cake to be taken home that evening. And for those of you out there, Hornsby North has the best sausage sizzle as the head of fundraising.
That is the most partisan thing you've said this program.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Julian. We'll be back just after a quick break, everyone. We'll be back with some weather and also giving you a brief rundown on all the networking events which are available to small business on the Upper North Shore area. Thanks once again, Julian.
Thanks, Alexi.
We were speaking to Julian Leeser, the Berowra candidate for the Liberal Party, who was very kindly here to talk to us all about lots of issues that are affecting small business. We talked about the economy, we talked about the environment, we talked about the local TAFE system, the NBN. So if you missed any of today's program, you can catch it on our podcast page of smallbizmatters.com.au, which will be available in the next couple of days. And of course, let me encourage everyone once again to head down to your local school and do the sausage sizzle thing, because that is the way that your local schools do fundraise in excess of a couple of $1,000s on one day. So make sure you support them there. So I hope you've all enjoyed listening to the candidates over the last 3 weeks. We, of course, had Emma Heidi from the Greens Party. We had Brendan Clark from the Science Party, and today Julian Leeser from the Liberal Party. Thank you very much for all of those candidates for joining us and really going in depth in the things that really matter to small business across the area. And we found out a lot of really good, interesting policy information as well. So thanks for joining us, everyone. We will be back next week, next Tuesday. I'm very excited to welcome a small business talking to us about getting organised for the end of financial year, getting prepared, getting yourself sorted so you can begin the financial year with a fresh set of eyes. That's going to be Linda Eagleton from Creative Surrounds. She is an organisation and marketing expert, so we're looking forward to having her next week on the show, plus a whole stack of other things coming up on Small Biz Matters in the weeks to come. Thanks for joining us today. We will be back next week on Tuesday. Small Biz Matters, the half-hour program where you work on your business rather than in it. You are listening to Triple H 100.1 FM.